ingredients in here. Today we are going to be making some brownies, some split pea soup, and some stuffed naan, ham and cheese stuffed naan. So let's start by, we'll whip up the naan so that that dough can hydrate. Then we'll make the brownies so they can pop into the oven, and we'll start on our split pea soup and all that jazz. Okay, so naan first. Gotta get my brain right. We are going to start with our wet base. So we need to add in a cup of discard. So this is a discard heavy recipe, which is great. Where is he? He's over here. We got to get Gus Gus. He's rather fat. He's ready to make some bread. He's, as you can see, he's about to burst over. You can use discard or you can use active starter. As you can see, I fed him up this morning, so he is quite active. Looks like I'll need a new cover on there tonight as well. So put that in the sink to wash up. But we're going to add in our cup of discard or starter. It doesn't matter. You're using it really for the flavor. So 1 whole cup of this. I'm going to pop it down, get those bubbles out, and then I'm going to make more bread today so that we can have homemade bread during Snowmageddon. So 1 cup of starter or discard. There we go. And then we're going to add in a 1/2 cup of either yogurt or sour cream. I'm all out of my yogurt, and so we're going to use sour cream today, which I find that they work fairly well, both of them on there. So if you're going to do it, just don't use like a Greek yogurt. I find Greek yogurt doesn't work quite as well for it, but either one works really well. Yogurt, again, is my preferred, but I don't like plain yogurt, so I rarely have it here unless I'm buying it specifically for naan. So we want about a 1/2 cup, which we've got a little in here, and then I'm going to have to, looks like I'm going to have to get a little bit more out of our fridge to make up for it. I thought I had a 1/2 cup in there, but I'm probably about a couple tablespoons shy. So let me grab a little bit more in here. We'll give it a nice squeeze. Always got to have lots of good sour cream. So there we go. That should be about 1/2 cup. And we're going to just take our discard and our sour cream or your yogurt. You're just going to mix it together until you've got it all kind of mixed in there. Kind of whip it up. There we go. So pretty good. And then we're going to add in 6 tablespoons of water and a 1/4 cup of olive oil, because we're going to be cooking this on a dry skillet. So you want the fat in the dough to kind of crisp it up. So we'll need a 1/4 cup. There we go. We're going to mix this, and then we're going to add in baking powder, baking soda, and salt. And then we'll add in our flour. We'll give it a quick knead, and then we'll let it hydrate. And the reason I'm making this up first is because for your naan, you want it to hydrate. You want the flour to really soak up the water in there so that it gets nice and elastic, so that when you like roll it out, then it will it won't rip when you roll it or tear. It will kind of stay together nicely. Okay, we've got a pretty good mix on it. Let's add in our baking powder and our baking soda. So we're going to use 2 teaspoons of baking powder with a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and then we're going to do 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt. But we're done with these, so we can grab these out of the way. So baking powder, 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And you don't want to mix it up or you'll have really puffy naan. So 2 teaspoons of baking powder. and then a half a teaspoon of baking soda. And then we're going to do 1.5 teaspoons of salt, which is the same as a half a tablespoon. I'm going to mix this in, and this will actually start reacting with our sourdough discard and our sour cream in here, which will start to make the base really light and fluffy, which again makes this naan so delicious and wonderful. Here. So getting it nice and mixed up before we add in our flour. That way it's all kind of, you won't have any pockets of it anywhere. But you can see it's just nice and light and fluffy now compared to where it was. It's kind of reacting with each other. And then we're going to add in 3 cups of flour. You can use bread or all-purpose. Both work fine for this recipe. There's not much of a difference. So whatever you have more on hand of, both work well for it. So 1, 2, and 3. We'll mix it together. It should have a slight tack to it, but not so sticky that you can't work with it. If you find that it's too sticky, always add in a little bit more flour. But we'll mix it here to where we have a nice kind of dry shag, and then we'll knead it together. But again, it shouldn't stick to your hands where it's completely unworkable on there. There we go. So we've got our dry kind of shag forming, and then I'm going to flip it out onto our counter, and then we'll knead it together into a nice ball, and we'll let that hydrate. Let's get this all the way around. So we're done with our dough whisk. Slide this out.
Mary sent you a gift.
Well, thank you, Mary. We appreciate that. I was trying to think I'm making split pea soup because I'm trying to make some batches of food to get to my parents before Snowmageddon happens, in case I can't bring them over food for a couple of days so that, they don't go hungry. And I was like, oh, I'll make them split pea soup because they love split pea soup. And that's not one that we just like. I love it, but nobody else in my family tends to care for it. So I can give them a big batch of it as a just in case. But I feel like nobody quite here knows exactly what's going to happen until it happens. I've never seen so many varying predictions in the amount of snow or ice that we're going to get. I don't know how you can say like 1 inch to like 16 inches. And, so I'm hoping we get a lot. I think where we live, we're just right on that line to where it's either going to be freezing rain or it's going to be snow. And I'm hoping for snow, snow, snow. Okay, we're kneading our dough here until you only need to knead it for like a minute or two until it's all kind of comes together. So any of these little flour crumbs that have dropped to the side, just knead them in. And as you can see right now, when you kind of move it, it breaks apart. That's why you want to let it sit for about 10 minutes or so. And it allows the flour to soak up the liquid and gives you a nice kind of good hydration, and there's nice elasticity to it so that when we are rolling it out, it will be ready. Okay. There. Okay. I think we're good. Pop that down for later. Give my hands a quick rinse. And then let's whip up these brownies real quick, because who doesn't love a good brownie? I'm making a small batch because I have a feeling we're going to do lots of cooking. I'm going to get a little small pan out here so we can melt our butter up. And and our chocolate chips. There we go. And I forget we'll need a griddle pan for later. But we're going to melt here 3/4 of a cup of butter with 1.5 cups of chocolate chips. So my brownies have a mixture of cocoa powder and chocolate chips in it, which makes them so delicious. And these are not my sourdough brownies. So I do have sourdough brownies, but these are just my plain traditional brownies, which are like more fudgy, richer. I do love a good sourdough brownie, but can't beat the original. So we need 3/4 of a cup, which is 1.5 sticks. I'm going to put this on and let it start to melt, and then we'll mix our chocolate on. And with melting the butter first, putting the chocolate, you don't have to really worry about your chocolate burning because you'll have this good layer of fat from the butter to protect it. And then let's get the other bit in here. Pop that down there. Once it's melted a little bit, we'll add in our chocolate chips. While that's waiting, we can get the rest of ours kind of going. So this has got a good amount of egg in it. So we're going to use 3 eggs plus 1 yolk. But that just makes them so delicious. So 2, 3, and let me get a small bowl for my whites. Then the yolk gives you just a fudgier, richer brownie base. We'll separate it out and we'll add that yolk in there. Give my hands a quick rinse. And then we're going to add in 1.5 cups of sugar to our eggs, and we're going to kind of mix them together. And that will cause we'll kind of essentially cream the eggs and sugar together. And our butter is just about to a point where I can drop my chocolate chips in. So here's 1 cup. And then we'll add 1/2 cup more. So 1.5 cups of granulated sugar. Now let's add in, before we mix those up, let's add in our chocolate chips. So a typical bag of chocolate has about 2 cups in it, so we don't need a full bag. But I like to reserve a couple chocolate chips to mix in at the very end, so we have some chocolate chunks in later. So we will use a full bag, just not all in our chocolate melting. I'm going to turn my temperature down now a little bit lower, now that we've got a good amount of our butter in there. And then we're going to pour in 1.5 cups of chocolate chips. Again, I'm going to reserve just a little bit, about 1/2 cup, to mix into our batter when we're done. Grab a little spatula here to stir this up. Now, you can still burn your chocolate, so keep it low and slow when you're doing this process. It will not take very long for the warm butter to melt your chocolate. So just don't forget about it and don't leave it on high. I've got it down to right around a 2.
You have a question. Would you add to the eggs?
So I have my 3 eggs plus 1 yolk and 1.5 cups of sugar for it. And then we'll cream those together, and then we'll add some more of our other ingredients. But let me give this a nice stir, because you want to kind of stir it for the most part. As you can see, my chocolate is fairly almost melted completely here. That I think I can turn off my heat, and then we'll just kind of stir it and let that residual heat finish it. So be just gentle, don't overcook it or burn it, because then you'll have scalded chocolate, which doesn't taste good. But you don't have to get out your double boiler and do it because there is so much that butter protects it from that barrier, but it doesn't make it, completely and, safe from it. It just allows you to do it because it's a pretty quick process. Okay, I'm going to remove it completely from the heat base of that, and then it should be ready there. Okay, we're going to take our eggs and our sugar here, and we're going to essentially kind of cream it together, where you just kind of mash it into the sides here.
You have an off-topic question. Someone making chili, they usually use kidney beans. All they have are pinto beans. Is that a good substitute?
Yeah, that will work. There's a slightly different texture, but a lot of chilies just use a pinto bean. That's a very common chili base to it. When you buy a chili bean mix, most of it is pinto beans. So common chili beans are pinto, and then a mixture of light and dark kidney beans. So pinto would work well with it. When I make my chili, that's one of the beans I add into it. I do light kidneys, dark kidneys, pinto beans, red beans, black beans, and then a white bean. I use 6 types of beans in my chili, but I tell you, I make this huge batch of chili that could feed an army and then some. Here we go. So here we've got our egg and our sugar creamed up. So you have kind of this nice kind of liquidy paste here for it. And you want to just make sure you have it all completely mixed in there. Then we're going to add in a tablespoon of vanilla extract. Here we go. And you can I always say vanilla and brownies, but yes, you need vanilla and brownies. Whole tablespoon. This is going to add this great flavor that will really enhance that chocolatey, deliciously goodness. Mix that in. And then we're going to add in baking soda and our salt. So we're going to add in, we'll do our salt first. We want to add in a half a teaspoon of salt in here. And if you don't, I use salted butter, but if you're not going to use salted butter, you need to add a little bit more salt in here. And then we're going to add in a little bit more our baking soda. We need 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda, and this is going to give us our little pop. Wait, not baking soda. Baking soda was for our things, our baking powder. 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder. Too much pop if we put baking soda in. So 3/4 of a teaspoon. So I've got, this is a half, and then a little bit more.
It's Mary's birthday, and she's going to Maggiano's tonight.
Ooh, happy birthday, and enjoy Maggiano's. I love Maggiano's. I love this. It's like a delicious Italian one. Their salad is amazing. I love their ravioli, and their meatball. You get their big things because whenever we go with a big family, so we always are getting these big dishes with everyone. But they always come out with a big giant meatballs. But my absolutely favorite is their braised beef and Parpendel pasta and a cream sauce. And I always ask for extra cream sauce. And they're always like, well, it's going to cost extra. I'm like, I don't care. Give me extra cream sauce because it's better with extra cream sauce. That's so good. Okay. And so we've got my baking powder. So 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt mixed in there. Let me give our chocolate swirl. We're not going to add this in yet. We add this in towards the end. I'm just giving it a nice swirl. You don't want to add it in with your eggs yet because you'll kind of cook your eggs in. We're going to add in our cocoa powder. Then we'll add in our flour, and then we'll stir this mixture in. So we do equal parts flour and cocoa powder. We're going to do 3/4 of a cup of cocoa powder, unsweetened cocoa powder, and then 3/4 of a cup of flour. One thing I have found with brownies is don't use the super healthy raw cacao powder. It does not make your brownies taste good. It gives them a really bitter flavor to it that I really just don't. I mean, it makes them like a really dark chocolate brownie. So stick with your classic, cocoa powder, Toll House, Basic, Nestle. Those are what make a really good chocolatey one. So we're going to do 3/4 of a cup of cocoa powder. So this is 1/4 of a cup. So I'm doing 3 of these. And then 3/4 of a cup of flour, because cocoa powder acts like it absorbs the liquid and acts kind of like flour does. And you want to use an all-purpose flour. There we go. We're going to mix these together. And then we'll add in our melted butter and our chocolate chips base to it once we get a good start to the mix of it.
You have a question. Are you in the path of the storms?
Yes, we are on apparently it's very difficult for our weathermen to predict what the weather's going to be like here. So we are either getting a foot of snow or we are getting freezing rain, but it could happen anywhere within 20 or 30 miles of us. But so they're like anywhere between nothing and a foot of snow. Be prepared. Lots of ice. So I'm hoping for Snowmageddon. I would love to have lots and lots and lots of snow.
So you use both chocolate chips and cocoa powder?
Yes, it's going to give you the chocolatey, fudgiest, best brownies ever for this. So I've got it in here. Now, I didn't completely mix my flour and my cocoa powder in because the butter and the melted chocolate will help that kind of mix in. Because cocoa powder, I will say, is like the trickiest thing to mix in. It always likes to fight it. But here we go. Look how wonderful this is. And then we will add in a few more chocolate chips as well so that you have, it's kind of like your triple chocolate brownies. Get these mixed up. And my oldest daughter, she was like, can you make brookies soon? And I'm like, well, I just made chocolate chip cookies. But I'm like, but I can make the other half. I'll make brownies. So essentially we have brookies. I know I made, earlier in the week, we made our copycat crumble. And then I only made a half batch. And then the next time, like, Evie came home and she goes, all of my friends really love the cookie. Please tell me we have another one. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I split it up between like the nieces and the little ones. And I'm like, I should have made a big batch. Okay, we're going to put the remaining bits of our chocolate chips in here. So that remaining half cup. And then we'll just give it a mix in. Now this part is completely optional, but it adds just an extra layer of chocolatey goodness so that when you bite into it, you have those nice little melted deliciousness, and they kind of firm up. So we're going to use, this is just a small batch of brownies. So I figured I'm going to be baking a lot if we are in true Snowmageddon. My kids always love, whenever we're stuck like this, they always love to tell me all their favorite things they want to be cooked. Okay, so we're going to spray down our pan. And we'll put our brownies in here. But you could always double this up for a 9 by 13 inch pan. And get that. Make sure we scrape it all off in here. But you can see just how delicious and fudgy and wonderful this is. It's because also, again, it's a butter base, no oil in it, and that just makes it even more delicious. Add it in there, and of course, have to steal a little lick. So good, so good.
Jenny said she good.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. We appreciate that. Oh, this just happened to fall to the side, guys. Don't know what happened there. Brownie batter is just one of those things.
And can you go over the ingredients one more time?
Yes. So it is, I'm giving a nice couple taps here, but our mixture is 3/4 of a cup of butter, 1.5 cups of sugar, 1.5 cups of chocolate chips, about 3 eggs plus 1 yolk, a tablespoon of vanilla, 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, And then that you're actually going to use 2 cups of chocolate chips all together, but that other half goes in at the very end. Mix it up. Then you have 3/4 of a cup of cocoa powder with 3/4 of a cup of flour. You've got these delicious fudgy brownies and a teaspoon or tablespoon of vanilla. 350 on the oven. And they're going to bake around 30 to 35 minutes on here because it's a smaller pan of it. So I'm going to put it in here for 30 minutes. We'll check on it, see if it needs a little bit more time. With brownies, they're going to look, you're going to take them, you're going to think, oh, they need to bake more. Don't bake them more. They need to come out. You let them sit. They firm up. Once that butter and egg solidifies, then they're perfect. Before I clean this up, let's get our soup going. Let me wash. I got some brownie mix on here. Let's get our split pea soup, onions, all that stuff cooking. Split pea soup is one of these soups that are really, really easy to make and requires very, very few ingredients. We're just going to use, I'm keeping it really, really simple here. Just some onions, garlic, split peas, and ham. You know, I actually could probably add in a few other vegetables. Carrots and celery would work really well with it. You know what? I might add those in there. I might send, my son just got home from school, so I might send him to go get some. Hey, Torin. Do you think you could go out into the fridge outside and get me some celery and carrots? Yes. Thank you. Like 3 carrots. They're in the pull-out drawer in the silver fridge, and some celery. Just bring it in and I'll put away whatever we don't need. Because I realized I decided I want some in there. In my mind, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to puree this. But split peas, I don't puree split pea soup. So I'm not sure why I thought that. It's when you have like 20,000 different soup combinations up here. But I'll put our little bit of olive oil in here. And we're going to get these guys in there sauteing. There we go. Hey, thank you, bud. Perfect. So I'm going to get a couple carrots out. I'll get them rinsed real quick. And some celery. Because these will be great flavors to add to our soup. Especially with our aromatics there. Hey, Torin, can you, the door popped open when you go lock it? It's so cold here that everything is like, the doors are contracting in, and so we're having to like lock everything down. But your hard work will earn you brownies. Okay, we've got our celery and our carrots ready for our soup. Get this up. Let me get a nice little toss here on here. There we go. Perfect. Get those. And then for our carrots, since I'm using the whole, if you're using baby, you know, you don't have to peel them, but with the whole ones, you really do want to peel this outer bit because it has a more earthy, you know, woodsy flavor and the texture's not great. And it can give you, if you use a lot of them in your broth, it can actually give like a really earthy, like kind of woodsy flavor to your broth. So always peel them off. That way you're left with the sweeter, like fleshier parts. And we'll get these here. And we'll dice these guys off. And then I'm just going to kind of chop them up into, kind of quarter them so that we have nice kind of cubed bits of carrots. There we go. And once our onions have a nice saute, we'll get these guys in there. And then for our naan, again, we're going to do like a stuffed naan. So I'm going to actually do a ham and cheddar stuffed naan because we're going to be using some ham in our soup. So I've got my big chunk of ham out for that. And then I've got, let's see, about 4 kind of stalks of celery here. And we're going to kind of, well, 5, but there a couple of them are small. We're going to slice them down the middle. And we'll let them, that way we have smaller kind of cubed pieces, which will kind of give you more bits in every bite. Keep the leaves on because that celery, those leaves have a lot of flavor. And so they will, again, add more flavor to your soup. So we'll get these in. We'll get our onions a nice toss, and then we'll throw these guys in there. I always let my onions to saute just a little bit on their own. That way they can start to kind of caramelize, let their natural sugars pop out before I add any more vegetables in there. Give this a nice toss. There. And wonderful. I'm going to mince up some garlic so that we can throw some garlic in there as well.
And how often do you sharpen your knife?
I will say I probably sharpen my knives every 2 to 3 weeks. Really depends on a lot of different things that I'm cutting. If I'm having, if I'm doing whole chicken and then I've got to cut through a bone or whatnot, then I'm going to have to sharpen them more often because it's going to dull it out, or if I'm using pretty firm vegetables. But I would say probably every 2 to 3 weeks. I know that's one thing that we're going to make our short on sharpening knives. I feel like people think it's really daunting, but it's really not that hard to sharpen up your knife. My knife set, which I've had these knives for going on 17 years, and they came with a honing steel, and they just work wonderful. Every time I feel like if it's an onion, a tomato, or pepper, those are the ones that I really notice when they are dull and they need to be sharpened up. That just takes me about a minute or 2, and then they'll be ready to go.
And did you go to culinary school?
I did not go to culinary school. I am self-taught. I started cooking when I was 13 years old, and I started with just 1 meal a week for my family, and then I slowly started to take over more because I really enjoyed cooking. And my parents were really big on fostering my love for cooking. They, would take me to Williams-Sonoma, check out the new cooking gear. They bought me the Fine Cooking Magazine, and Gourmet Magazine. So I always got those. I got monthly subscriptions to those. So I was always reading up on those recipes and trying them out as a kid. And that really fostered my love for cooking. And then just over the years, I've just kind of honed those skills up. I mean, it's almost 25 years since I kind of took over family dinners, and haven't stopped. Okay, we added in about a tablespoon of fresh garlic. Give that a nice toss in there with the rest of our kind of more aromatic veggies. And then we're gonna get our ham. And then we'll toss in our split peas for this. But I've got this is our smoked ham for it, so it's already, cooked up. Let's see. We'll open this up. But I actually bought this. I was like, oh, this will be perfect. It'll be perfect also during I always say this is always such a really reasonable priced piece of meat that you can use for so many different things. You can put it in your soups, omelets, sandwiches. I always buy it kind of the full chunk here. I'm going to kind of cut off the outer skin as much as possible. It has a bit more of a texture. There's nothing wrong with eating it, so you can definitely keep it on there. It just doesn't have as nice of a texture, so I like to take it off. But you can use, a big chunk of ham like this in so many different ways. It's more versatile than if you just buy like a sandwich ham or the sliced ones. So we're going to cube it up, and then we'll use some of it will go with our naan and some will go with our soup. And I find smaller bits just work out a little bit nicer in your soup, so you don't just have a huge chunk of ham. Okay. And I think this is all we'll need for both of them because we don't need a whole lot. A little bit of ham will go a long way. Packs a good punch of flavor. So we can set that to the side. And I like to do, instead of like a sweet brown sugar one, I like to do a smoked ham, which I find has a little bit more flexibility because it doesn't have the sweetness in it, meaning you can add it to a bit more, different like dishes. So we're going to put in a good part of this in here. And then I got to remember to pay the cameraman his tax. He asked for some ham because he saw it. So and put out a couple pieces for the cameraman as well. And then we'll save some for our naan, which I'll cut up a little bit smaller when we go there because I don't want to have super huge chunks in our naan. But we're going to do like a ham and cheddar naan, like stuffed naan. Get this turned down just a second. Give my hands a quick rinse. And then I'm actually going to start turning on my skillet over here because it always takes a hot minute for the skillet to warm up. Slide this to the side. We're going to add in some spices. I've got some fresh oregano. And then we also are, not fresh oregano, fresh thyme. And then I have some dried oregano that we'll add in as well. But I'm going to just kind of take off the leaves and leave the leaves whole. I'm not mincing it up, the spices. Kind of like them a little bit more whole in this soup. It makes them a little less intense. But just make sure you don't leave any of those sprigs in there. Yeah. So it'll be about a teaspoon of fresh thyme. If you're going to use dried thyme, just use a little bit less. Dried thyme has a bit more flavor. Let me pick out those two little twiggies. There we go. And okay. And then we're going to add in some dried oregano. I love oregano, so we're going to use a good helping of it. We're going to use about a teaspoon and a half. And then a little bit of black pepper, about a half a teaspoon. And then we're going to throw in about 2 bay leaves. Give this a nice stir. And then we're going to mix in our split peas. I'm going to use about half a bag of split peas for this because will absorb a good amount of liquid, and a full bag would require a pot twice this size. So just about a half a bag. So I'm just going to kind of grab it and pour it in here. Oh, I should have made Swedish pancakes. So I should have made platta with that. Typically in Sweden, whenever they have split pea soup, they make it with Swedish pancakes. Well, I always have another half of a bag for another day. I'm going to let them saute just for a little bit on the pan here. Kind of get a little nice kind of flavor in them before we add in our broth on there.
You got a question? What is naan?
Naan is like a pillowy, soft flatbread, essentially. That is just really delicious. The thing that makes it different from a flatbread is it doesn't use yeast, and it uses a mixture of, here's our dough kind of proof, or not proofing, but it uses a mixture of baking powder, baking soda, and like a yogurt or sour. I'm using sour cream because you kind of use together for it, which gives it makes it really moist and tender bread. We also have a cup of our sourdough discard in here, which also, again, makes it delicious. Now, while that's sauteing for a second, I'm going to clean up this area just a smidge because I don't want cocoa powder getting in our naan. That would not be delicious. And that way we can start rolling them out, because then we'll stuff them with some freshly grated cheddar cheese and our diced up ham. And then we'll cook them. And I add my herby butter that we had left over from last night's dinner, from our little steak dinner, that I'm going to actually use to kind of, when they come off, I'm going to rub that over the top so you'll get this nice herb flavor on them.
Are you streaming tonight, and do you know what you're making?
Yes, I am planning to stream tonight. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to be making yet, but I think
You should have steak.
we just had steak. That's what it is, a thing. I feed my family steak, and then that's all they can think about is how they want their next meal of steak. And I'm just like, you know what? They just think, steak grows on trees, and I can just go outside and pick a fillet off for it because they think it's cheap and past the penny. I wish. There we go. Okay, we are cocoa powder free. That's what my oldest daughter, she's every time, can we have steak for dinner? Or then her next thing, well, can we have scallops? And I'm like, that's even more expensive than steak. I said, guys, got to live in reality here. Those are like special. We can have that like, maybe once a month. Maybe. You got to pick one or the other. Unless I get them on a really good deal, it's not happening. But, sometimes that's what I always look for. My stores will sometimes have like buy one pack of steak, get one free. And it's typically like the porterhouse or like a T-bone, a really great steak. But I guess people, they needed to get them out. And I'm like, of course I'll get a pack one, because there'll be 2 steaks in one. And I'm like, yes, I will do that. I will take that deal. But if it's not on sale, not buying it unless it's a special occasion. Okay, we're going to add in our broth. So this is water, and then we'll add in some chicken bouillon. We're going to start with about 1 cup. Let me add a little bit more. And then we're just going to kind of scrape the bottom of our pan, lift up any of those split peas or those dried on herbs, and kind of just scrape it off so that they all get incorporated into the base of our broth. There we go. And mix it some more. And then I think I'm actually going to add a little bit more. About 2 more cups, because they can absorb a lot of liquid. There we go. So I'm going to use about 6 cups of broth for our base of it, because I don't want it to be a completely super mushy, like just pea base to it. I want it to have a little bit more of a soupy consistency to it. And then we're going to add in a nice big heaping scoop of chicken bouillon. I'm going to add a larger scoop than normal because I used more liquid. So typically with this, you use about a teaspoon per cup of water. So I need about 6 teaspoons here. I'll mix that in, and if I need some more in later, I'll add some more, but I think that's about 6. We'll let it simmer for a while. The ham will also add a little bit of saltiness flavor to it. Now, you can buy ham bouillon out there. I just find that it's a bit too strong. You can use, I've done it where I've done a little bit of ham bouillon with chicken bouillon or vegetable bouillon, and that's better. But all ham, I think, is a bit too strong on the ham side. Okay, we'll let that simmer here. Let's chop up our remaining bits of ham here, just a little bit smaller because I don't want to have super big chunks of ham in my naan. And then we'll grate up some cheddar cheese. And that way we can stuff it inside and we'll kind of cook it up. So think about a non-quesadilla almost like. But we'll kind of pinch the sides together and it will be lovely. And you know what I might actually do? I might toast up my ham just a little bit so that it's not so cold going into the naan. Let me grab a smaller. We'll grab this one. And then I'll start rolling these out. So while that's heating up there. So let me add a little bit of butter. We'll toast that.
How long does the soup need to cook for?
The soup, so with the split peas, you typically want it to simmer for about 20. I toasted them, so it doesn't need quite as long as 30 minutes for the simmering process. It typically needs about 20 or so minutes. So we'll be roughly right at the end. You want to just taste it to make sure. A little bit more broth means typically you can use a little bit less timing on it. Toasting your split peas like I did cuts a little bit of that cooking time down instead of just pouring them straight into a liquid broth or a base. I'm going to add a little bit of butter here. I'll turn that on. I'll mince up a little bit of garlic to throw in there with the butter and then our ham. And then we'll grate our cheese. We'll start rolling out our naan so we can have that start toasted. My skillet here, it looks like it's nice and hot, so I'm going to turn it down to a 4 because that's typically what I toast my naan on, is a nice lower number. You want to go kind of low and slow so it has enough time to steam everything together. But you can really stuff your naan with so many. It doesn't have to just be like ham and cheese. You can do, you could do a pizza stuffed naan, shredded chicken in there. Lots of great flavors that could work. Spinach would be delicious as well. Although I think my husband would boycott that in his.
You have a question? Are the split peas easy to find in the store?
Yes, so they're going to be in your bean aisle, wherever you find your dried beans. If you just keep looking there, they're going to be right next to like the lentils too. Split peas are right there. I like the green split peas. Sometimes there's yellow split peas as well. I think the green tastes a little bit nicer. There we go. Get that melted. And we'll toast that up real quick. We got to share our burners here. And then while we're rolling that, let me grab my little roller and we'll get going with our little naan here. We can start kind of rolling them out here. So here is our beautiful kind of dough naan. Actually, we'll do just another little kind of wrap it around. But you see as we move it here, it is much more elastic than the first time. It doesn't tear. It moves more gently. That's because the flour has had a chance to hydrate. Okay. So I'm going to divide it up so that we can stuff it. And I like to make really, when I do stuff, I make really big ones just because it's a lot easier to make 2 really big stuffed naan than a bunch of little ones. So I'm going to make kind of 4 big naan and then I'll push them together. But you want to kind of roll them out nice and thin so that you don't have them too thick, because if they're too thick, they're not going to cook up as well. And also remember that they will puff up more. You have that baking powder and that baking soda in here that is going to cause it to fill up and like puff up. So it will be thicker. So even though it looks thin now like a tortilla, it's going to be much thicker once it cooks up. So don't leave them thick. There we go. So I've got that one.
You have a question, what's in the naan?
So in the naan, it's really simple. I used a cup of my sourdough discard with a half a cup of sour cream. Typically yogurt's used, but a lot of times I don't have yogurt, so I'll sub in sour cream, full fat sour cream. And then you'll mix that up. You'll add in 6 tablespoons of water, 1/4 a cup of olive oil, and then 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Mix all of that together, and then you add in 3 cups of flour. And that, then you just knead it together. It'll have a slight tack. It won't be super, sticky or anything like that. And then you just let it sit for at least 10 minutes for it to hydrate. Okay, let's get our cheese here. We'll grate it, we'll go it in there, and we'll kind of stuff it up. Now we can start toasting it off on here. And then we'll put it on there. Let me grab my cheese grater because I think I forgot to set it down. And I kind of like to coat, I'll put cheese on, and then I'll put some of our sauteed ham on here, and then I'll put a little bit more cheese on top. But you don't need to put huge amounts of it because it's not going to be like a super cheesy inside. We'll spread it around, maybe a little bit more. And then let me give it a toss. Just enough to heat the ham up so it's not so cold going into our pocket. I think this should be good. So I can turn that off. And it has that nice little garlic butter on it as well. Before I put this on here, because I'm actually going to lift this up here, I'm going to roll out my other one. Then I can put it up here, put the ham, we'll press it on there. Because if you try to move it too much while we work, actually, I think I should be able to work with it just fine. Sometimes if you try to move it when you've stuffed it, you can put it there, but I think we'll be good. So I'm going to divide, because I'm just making 2 big ones. I'm going to divide my ham bits that I have here. There we go. That's about even. And we're going to grate just a little bit more cheese on top. And then remember, I saved some of my herby butter from yesterday to rub over the top of these when they're done cooking up, so that I have just this lovely kind of extra herb flavor to them. So we'll roll this out. Again, nice and thin. You don't want it too thick because, again, you are going to be having 2 of them on top of each other. And you want them to be roughly, the same size. Okay. Let's put these guys. Oh, I need a little bit more rollage because once I picked it up, it shrunk back in. Now my skillet is nice and hot. That's typically the longest wait time that you have is your skillet. So that will allow the cook up time to go much faster. Here we go. So we're going to pinch around, seal it in.
You have a question. What kind of countertops do you have, and are they heat and stain resistant?
So they are quartz countertops, which means they're like heat resistant up to like a certain temperature, and then they're stain resistant. For the most part, like you typically, sometimes you get a residual stain for like a half minute, but you can always get it out on there. So I love them. That was one of the kind of the reasons why I got them over some of, like things that you don't have to seal. They're like 0 maintenance, which is really, really nice. Pop out some of that air in there. There we go. And now We'll put this on here and we'll let it kind of cook up. As we'll give our soup a little stir here, and then we can work on our next one. That way it will be ready to go up there for it. But let's give our soup a nice stir. And then I'm going to taste, I'll get a spoon. I'm going to taste our broth base, make sure that it has enough, all this, enough bouillon in it. Perfect. You can really taste that thyme and oregano. It's just really lovely. Okay, our brownies are just about. Let's go check on them, see if they need any more time on them. I always do the look. I did that base 30 minutes. Sometimes they take a little bit longer, but we'll look. Again, they're in that 8 by 8 inch pan, so those cook a bit faster. Let's give them looking beautiful. I'll give them a little tap. I think they are ready. The best way to check is I'm going to grab my fork here or a knife, and you just stick it in, and if it comes out clean, then it is cooked all the way through. So let me pull this out. Yep, not yet. Good thing I checked. They were almost ready. So a few more minutes and then we should be ready. I'll do my timer, 5 minutes, and that should when everything else should be done. Delicious though. We'll set those up. We'll have this. Let me check and see if we're ready to flip this guy. Now these things are heavy. Almost. We've got a nice little golden edge forming, so just about. And then we'll flip this over and we'll cook it on the other ones. I'm going to get a little cutting board out for it so that once it's cooked, we can slide it off on there and coat it with our butter. And then while we're waiting for that, let's shape up our next one, our last one. To go in these, and these are huge, so they're meant to be shared. They're not a single serve. There we go. But it's easier to make them just one big one than a bunch of little ones. Simply ease of it. Now you can definitely take the time to make smaller ones for things. But if I did that for my family, I'd be here all day. Okay, we'll roll this out nice and thin. On there, and then we're going to layer it with our ham on our grated cheddar cheese. There. So again, nice and thin because you don't want it too thick. Otherwise, it will, when you double it up, it will be way too thick. I think we are looking beautiful here. Look at that. Gorgeous. So we're going to toast it up, and we want the exact same thing on that side. Got to go low and slow, not too fast on it, because you want it to steam all the way through and cook the other side. Here, our soup is looking good. Slowly, as you can see, the peas are starting to get thicker and thicker. They're absorbing up the broth. So these split peas are not like dried beans. They're similar to lentils in the fact that they soak up the liquid much faster. Dried beans will take several hours for you to kind of rehydrate them and make them soft. Okay, cheese first. We'll grate this out, and you can use a variety of cheeses. I love a good cheddar cheese with ham, but Gouda would work well. Swiss would work well. All of them would, I feel like ham is one of those cheeses that actually goes with a lot of different cheeses or meats. So great. A good little bit around here. Kind of spread it out. You don't want, of course, you want to leave your ends kind of like you would with a pizza, a little bit so that you can press it all together. put this in here. This is our ham with a little bit of that fresh garlic that we toasted up with some butter. So we'll have some nice flavor in it. Let's check a peek. Looking good, looking good. And then we'll grate a little bit more over the top. That way you just have cheese on both sides to kind of seal it up. And again, you don't need a whole lot for it, but just enough. Roll this guy out and we'll seal it up. There. But I always say the longer your naan dough sits, the easier and smoother it rolls out, because it really gives you that time to hydrate, which is what gives that nice elasticity to it. If you try to whip it up and then are impatient and roll it out too soon, as you roll it, you're just going to end up tearing it. So it's really important to give it the rest time for it.
You have a question. Did you make the dough from scratch, or is it something you can buy from the store?
I made it from scratch, and it's a fairly simple, easy dough to make. You don't need to do a lot of work with it. There's no proofing, kneading. It's just a bunch of kneading, mix the ingredients together, let it sit for like 10 minutes. And very, very easy, but delicious for it. Okay, our brownies are just about done, but I think this guy is ready to come off. Look at this, so delicious. So I'm going to flip him over on here. Looks amazing. And then we'll grab our brownies out in just a second. But look, we're going to take this as the herby butter I made last night that has basil, thyme, basil, green onions, garlic, and garlic salt in it. And we're going to rub it over it. And that's going to add this great herby flavor to our naan as well. You want to do it on both sides. There we go. So I said, if you have leftover herby butter, don't just get rid of it. Save it, because it can be used on so many different things. There we go. Let's go grab our brownies out. They should be ready. Remember when I say that you're going to want to keep baking them, don't. Brownies are the ones that need to sit for about, I always say, they need to sit for a really hot minute. I can look in there and they are, yep, where I poked my fork in. They need to sit for 30 minutes to an hour to completely cool and solidify. And then that's when you can eat them.
Yo, I have a question for you.
What's for dinner tonight? I am not 100% sure what's for dinner tonight. I have an idea. I think I'm either going to do stuffed shells or I'm going to make chicken noodle soup, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't been sold on what one I'm going to do it yet. But these are our delicious fudgy brownies, and they're going to be so good. Let's put this top on here. We'll seal it up. We'll get this on there to cook on there. And then I'm going to taste my peas, see where they are. This is a great soup that the longer it sits, the better it goes. It can simmer and simmer for it, so it works really well. Take it, make sure you leave a little pocket to kind of squeeze out that air. Pinch those. And we're going to get this guy up there. Wonderful. Again, low and slow, and then a little bit more herby butter on here because it's going to be delicious. Okay, let's taste our soup here. And I'm going to grab up a pea because I think they should be soft enough. You can see they've already kind of changed in color. they're tender for it. But the nice thing is you can continue to even cook them for, depending on how soft you want them. If you want them like to turn into a paste where they make your soup thing, let them simmer for another 30 minutes. If you like them to still have body and form, eat them now. But if you like them soft but with form, now. If you want them to be where they turn into the base of your broth, that is when you can do it. But let's get ready to serve up for it. And we're going to cut into our little naan here. Let's see. I'll check this. Let me slide this over here. And then we'll get a bowl for our soup. We've got that. And then I'm going to bring my little naan over here because this is more than any. This is really like 4 servings in one. It's pretty big, but we'll cut into it when we serve it up. But that herby butter is what's going to be, it's going to make this. It's going to be delicious. You grab a knife and I'll grab a ladle for our stew. There we go. We're going to let it simmer. And let's get ready to serve up. So let's start with our stuffed naan. So today we made a sourdough stuffed naan. Inside we have our cheddar cheese, our ham, and our kind of sauteed garlic. We put our herby butter that was left out, but do you see all that melted, delicious cheese in there, steamed up? We toasted it on there, so just full of wonderful flavor. That herby butter has got garlic, green onions, all sorts of deliciousness on it. And then we're going to serve this with our split ham and split pea soup. For it, I made a more of a brothy based split pea soup, so it's a bit more homey with our carrots, celery, onions, and about a cup of split peas in it, but a nice brothy base to it with dried thyme and oregano in there, and just nice, really herby broth for it. And then, of course, we will serve it once they have finally set our nice homemade chocolate brownies that has both melted chocolate and cocoa powder in the base, which gives them the most delicious chocolatey overload flavor to them that are fabulous. And of course, chocolate chips on top of it. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made, our ham and split pea and ham soup with our ham and cheddar stuffed naan and our homemade double chocolate, technically triple chocolate brownies. And you can always watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my Hex-Clad griddle pan, my Dutch ovens, knives, cutting boards, all the different things that I use in the kitchen. But again, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.